Hello, everyone, and welcome. People are still joining us in this webinar space. Thank you so much for being here. As folks arrive, I would love to invite you to use the chat feature and just share with us where you're coming in from. Where in the world are you located? So you can access the chat on the bottom bar of your screen. Oh, Costa Rica, Chicago, Cleveland, Texas, Brazil, Austin. Oh, all over the place.
Oh, wow.
France. Oh, this is so fun to see. What an international group.
Wow.
Wow.
Oman, London, Zurich, Ottawa, Berlin. Wow.
Yep.
Columbus, Flint.
Toronto, Maldives, India, Ottawa. Wonderful. Welcome, 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 everyone. I'm Steph Stern. I'm a director at the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. I'm joined by Bill, Duane, and Cecily Mak. We'll give a little bit longer intros in a minute. But really, truly welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us in this moment. I know we all have a lot going on right now. And I also want to recognize that the three of us are all white, joining from San Francisco Bay Area, and we will try and hold a broader perspective. And this is also really an invitation to all of you to share your experiences in the chat as well. Romania, Argentina, Virginia, super exciting to see where everyone is joining from. Just love that this is such a global community coming together for this hour, particularly in this time. So I'd love to hand it over to Bill. In Search Inside Yourself, we really love to start with taking a minute to arrive and to really bring our full presence into this moment. So Bill, would you lead us in a arrival practice?
Sure. So if you're like me, your mind has really been a hamster on a wheel. And that's perfectly understandable. And I want to really echo, amplify, and extend this explicit welcome to everybody. You know, especially you're welcome just as you are. If you're feeling like cracking a joke to break the humor, that's welcome. If you're feeling sad, that's welcome. And so when we talk about these practices of emotional intelligence, we talk about making friends with the way things are now. So we're going to do a little practice with the intention of that. And then maybe else something to keep in mind is that, you know, we can hold our intention, and how it actually unfolds sometimes has a life of its own. So we set the intention and then we let go of it. So let's set the intention of actually being here, not in the mind going out in its 10,000 directions and planning for all sorts of stuff. So just for a minute, let's just let ourselves catch a break. And one of the ways that we can do that is taking our spotlight of attention that many times is flying all over the place and just put it in one place. So just for now, if it feels comfortable to you, just put it on the sensation of breathing. You can pay attention to the in-breath, the pause, and then the out-breath. And sometimes if we're feeling a little wound up, we can do a little hack and exhale longer than we inhale. So just try that for a few breaths. And then, of course, after a very short amount of time, our attention wanders. Meet that with some kindness. And just for a little bit, just cut yourself some slack and just gently, kindly put your attention back on breathing. If breathing is uncomfortable, feel free to choose another object, like the sensation of weight in the chair. One of my teachers has a saying that they use in meditation of right now, it's like this. So just bring your attention to right now and what it's like, and it's going to be a little bad, a little good, a little indifferent, and just see if you can welcome all of it and set the intention to honor where you are, wherever that may be. So thank you. We have, I hereby declare us arrived. I don't have a bell within arm's reach.
Thank you, Bill. And Bill, you're getting some good compliments on your glasses.
Yeah, I went to the glasses store. I said, what do you have that's subtle?
Nice, nice. So as Bill said, where you are right now is fine. And we'd love to invite you to, again, just use the chat and let us know, how are you arriving in a word or a phrase, welcoming everything that's here. This is a time with a wide range of experiences. I'm sure all of us are experiencing kind of a roller coaster of emotions. So wherever you are is just fine. Of that, giving myself permission to just be grateful, slowing down, a little nervous. And as the chats flow in, we'll just take a moment to really read and absorb them. Some curiosity, a lot of gratitude, some people feeling grounded, serene, some nervousness, some overwhelm.
Yeah, I'm noticing, I mean, the interesting thing about watching the chat go by is that regardless of where you are on any sort of continuum, you're not alone. I get, just having watched those go by, if you're happy, if you're excited, if you're anxious, if you're like, you're actually with hundreds, if not thousands of people that feel the same way that you do. You're not alone.
Yes, absolutely. And so welcome again, welcome all of you, over 500 folks joining us together here today, and welcome to all of the feelings and experiences we're all having. We'll start with some quick introductions, and if Bill and Cecily, each of you can share just a little bit about who you are, how you realized emotional intelligence was an important skill. There was a aha moment. And particularly in this time, what are you leaning on right now? What are some of the practices that have been really helpful for you in navigating these times of uncertainty, anxiety, overwhelm? Cecily, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with a moment of vulnerability and just share it's very moving to see people from all over the world. I'm finding a bit of my own emotion in starting a conversation about emotional intelligence. So thank you so much for joining the space and for setting it up. My name is Cecily Mak. I am one of the members of the board for the Search Inside Yourself Learning Institute. In my professional life, I've been a practicing attorney for almost 20 years. I've primarily worked with media and tech companies and startups, but I also have a steady stream of work in the mindfulness and consciousness and self-awareness space. Beyond my professional role, I'm a very privileged and blessed mother of two incredible young boys. They're aged 9 and 12. They're doing their own remarkable job of navigating this time, and it's really a privilege to be a witness of a child. And so this is something that's very much on mind for me as we go through this change as humanity is at the moment. What's up for me right now is really a heightened awareness around how many of the tools and ways with which I work and communicate and exchange with people in my life are really particularly potent and valuable right now in this moment. I've observed just in myself and in my family and my loved ones a sense of calm that has taken a bit of time to get to that place. It does not mean that I don't have my moments of deep sadness and fear and concern and insecurity, and even at moments terror, like many of us are sharing and experiencing around the world. But there is this sense, this awareness of what there is to be grateful for as well. And just being thoughtful about, for example, I'm dialing in from my home in Mill Valley, where I know there's food to eat and fresh water to drink, and my immediate family is nearby and healthy. And I try to bring myself and ground myself with those awarenesses. I'm also using that work a lot with the companies that I communicate with. I've actually spoken with 11 different CEO founders and kind of core leadership teams just in the last 7 or 8 days. This is part of my regular life, and being a coach and an advisor and an investor. I work with Consensus, which is a blockchain company that has some deep partnerships and investments across over 100 companies around the globe in the blockchain space. And interestingly, these tools that we're going to be talking about today have been incredibly valuable in the day-to-day working life as well. So starting calls with attunement to what the people on the other side of the video screen need in that moment. Sometimes it's something that wasn't on the agenda at all, but we can together align and collaborate and use that space and time in a thoughtful way. So we'll leave it at that and get into the rest in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecily. And Bill.
My name is Bill, and I'm also a board member of the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And my day job now consists of working with for-profits, doing work on resiliency and innovation, and then quite a bit with nonprofits, particularly around veterans issues, and work a little bit with kids who are locked up. And so I have and also work on artificial intelligence and ethics as sort of the third part of the plate. And you know, it's always funny when I do these things, because when did I realize emotional intelligence was important? Like in my 20s, I actively thought emotions are bullshit. Like the world would be a better place, a safer place, a more sane place if we didn't have emotions. And so, you know, I think I realized like this is not working out well for me at the same time that I went through a period of intense burnout at work, which put pressure on social relationships. And then I attended a tech talk by one of the Search Inside Yourself key originators, Philippe Golden, that said, emotion makes perfect sense in terms of evolutionary biology, and you can't wish it away. And not only that, but there's actually things that you can do to not be a slave to emotion. And so interestingly, the way to have, I won't say mastery, but for me to have a more skillful relationship with my emotions was actually to turn towards them with curiosity and kindness, rather than the way I had, which was to, you know, suppress and ignore. What am I leaning on right now? You know, being in the body has been extraordinarily useful. You know, one of the things that's taught in Search Inside Yourself is every emotion has a sensory correlate. There's some way of feeling it in the body. And when I tend to be an anxious person, which is helpful in some ways, I'm always thinking through, but to be with that anxiety in the body and to try and make friends with it. One of the traps I can fall into is that if I don't feel good, it means my meditation practice or my emotional intelligence is low. You know, and that's not actually it. Sometimes it's perfectly reasonable to be afraid or angry or everything else. So what I'm leaning on right now is, instead of trying to use whatever skills I've picked up over the years to beat my emotions, is to just welcome them and make friends with them, and then to realize that you know, that's realizing that truth has been huge for me.
Thank you, Bill. That's really beautiful and very relatable to me. So again, I'm Steph Stern. I'm a director at the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, where I lead our team that brings the Search Inside Yourself program into other organizations. It's a program that was originally developed at Google, focusing on mindfulness-based emotional intelligence. So just a little bit of background there. And like Bill, what you were sharing, I've really been leaning on self-compassion practice. So just really being able to face the whole range of things and welcoming them in, not making them wrong, but really tending to whatever is here and letting it transform and shift over time. So to set a little bit of context for our conversation today, we had, of course, originally scheduled this webinar several weeks ago, which feels like several years ago now. And we were thinking about, as we enter this new decade, some of the longer term workplace trends that we're seeing: high levels of burnout, disengagement, isolation, the movement towards distributed teams and remote working, disruption to jobs and our economy based on automation and shifting skill sets that are needed. And of course, this global pandemic has sort of overtaken us all. And I think many of the trends and themes we were already thinking about just feel like they've really heightened in intensity. So we wanted to, of course, still come together and do this webinar. We really see that emotional intelligence skills are needed, I think now more than ever. It's really more of an acceleration and intensification based on the themes we've been thinking about, rather than a wholesale switch. And at the same time, we've seen way more interest in this topic, which has been so interesting. So the number of folks registered has pretty much tripled just in the last couple of weeks. So I feel like we're really hitting on some interesting nerve here. And of course, part of that is this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world we live in, this VUCA world. It's one of the framings we use for the Search Inside Yourself program that feels, of course, more true now than ever. So today, we're really going to just focus on some specifics about emotional intelligence, how it can support us, its relationship to resilience in this time of intense uncertainty and overwhelm, and how we can really use that to face what's here and to thrive. So I'd love, Cecily, if you would kind of give us a launching point, and let's just start by defining some terms. What are we talking about when we talk about emotional intelligence? And I know you talk about it as a superpower. So please share more about that.
Sure. You know, it's a funny phrase. In a lot of ways, I think Bill was starting to speak to this. It's in some ways more about emotional awareness or emotional mastery or presence or acknowledgement of emotions. I've really thought about emotional intelligence as a combination of not only your self-awareness, but then particularly in a work and engaging in various environments as an awareness of others. Being able to enter any environment, any exchange, any dialogue or conversation or room or virtual room, and be attentive to what is happening beyond your own being, and adapt the way that you relate or exchange or communicate, or even how that collective might spend some time, in many ways informed by what you're perceiving. So a lot of the superpower is really about being a highly perceptive person, and then being willing and able to adapt moment by moment with what is in play with the person that you're with. And of course, this happens in our intimate relationships. In some ways, it's easier to do that in our intimate relationships because we know the people well enough, and we know that if their posture is a certain way, or if they're looking in a certain direction, it matches to a pattern that we are aware of in that person. And we know that that might be the way that they're intentionally or unintentionally expressing where they are. And we can adapt our exchange with them that way. It's particularly valuable in a work and in a professional or educational environment as well. I taught actually for 12 years at UC Hastings, and I used to always try to make sure I had enough space at the beginning of every class to just tune into where the students were and try to spend the beginning of the time we had together bringing everybody into a common space. And that happens in a work environment as well. In this particular moment with the crisis that's going on, I've been using some of these tools just over the last week in particular. Consensus is a global company. We have people, hundreds of people all over the world, and we are a remote first company. So we're quite fluent and adept with tools like Zoom and Slack and working from home. So we haven't had those adjustments. The potency of our adjustments has been in that we're all dealing with our own immediate experience of the crisis and maybe health issues in our family, maybe even diagnoses and grave illnesses in our families. And so we've been still meeting and staying on the same schedule. That hasn't changed, but the way that we're starting our conversations is different. And in moments like this, even on Zoom, instead of jumping right into an agenda, we're using those tuning into awareness, self-awareness and awareness of others' capabilities to make sure that we ground together and exchange empathy, even if it's through a screen and over thousands of miles. Really make sure that we know how we can support each other while trying to support our company and its evolution, but also each other in the role that we're trying to fill. So it's really about that awareness beyond yourself, how you use it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Cecily, you gave us an example yesterday of kind of what that actually looks like for you in a recent meeting. Would you be willing to share?
Of course. I sit on an advisory board of a lovely startup in the fintech space, and it's actually a married couple. They're co-founders, and we have a weekly sync where we talk about how things are going with the financing and certain things happening with teams or engagements or contract issues or product issues or whatever might be up. And we had our call on Friday, a regular weekly time, and it was different. I was at this table. My 12-year-old was next to me. My 9-year-old was across the table from me. They were in Palm Springs, not in their office in San Francisco. One of them was wearing a robe and their cat was in the background. And we spent the entire, it ended up being, just under half an hour call, just sharing our collective experience about what is happening today. And that is what they needed the most in that moment. That was my way as a member of their advisory board and kind of coach to them to be of service to them in that moment. And their willingness to adapt and evolve to meet me in that way, and my ability to be extremely vulnerable and honest with them about my own circumstances created this bridge of connection that deepened our working relationship and helps them feel more trusting and safe with me as a member of their team, and empowers me to be more connected with them as we continue to work together, hopefully for many years.
Yes, I love that. Really meeting people where they are and recognizing that this global pandemic is really impacting people in such a variety of different ways. From the literal, some people are working harder than ever, some people are out of a job, to the emotional realm of where we are in our reactions. I think in these times of crises, there can also be a feeling of, oh, let's go back to just the necessities. And I'm curious to hear from both of you. Do you see emotional intelligence as a luxury or a necessity in this time?
Bill's already laughing. I'm going to let him speak to that first.
I know,
Yeah.
it's a leading question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, one of my teachers, Shinzen Young, says that suffering is pain times resistance. And so when you're going through situations in life that are challenging and, it's going, there's going to be difficulty. Now, the question is that, would you rather have this amount of difficulty or this amount of difficulty? And I think these emotional intelligence practices and skills are the way of, it's not a way of removing difficulty from your life, but it is a way of being skillful for it. And then, I think it's really crucial that we also talk about this in the context of a group of people. One of the most, I don't really want to call it interesting, but one of the things that's equally scary and hopeful is that we're all going through this together, right? We are all having our own ups and downs, in sync with the people around us, out of sync with the people around us. And there's a real possibility for us to look at our own fear and difficulty and then to be connected to other people by it, right? So in particular, I think a lot about delivery people and supermarket people. I have the privilege that I can do most of my work from home, right? And so how can I realize that we are all in this together, and therefore actions that I take need to necessarily not only benefit me, but other people. And so when we look at just even in all of us as individuals and our experience about would I rather be in this amount of pain or this amount of pain? Well, here. But if we're diligent about this, we also create a platform that then everybody can benefit from, right? So if we're feeling calm and stable and spacious to even some degree, we can extend that to other people. So to loop around to your question, Steph, is like, is that optional? I think a lot of people are going to go through the experience without it, but I think especially those of us that have been practicing for this, it's a call to arms, but maybe these kind of arms.
Yeah, I love that, Bill. There is something really powerful about the ripple effect of how we show up in our moment. I was actually listening to Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle this morning, who, if you haven't picked up on Brene's new podcast, I highly recommend that for some of this downtime. But they really speak to when you transform and when you show up in a certain way, it's not a private affair. It actually immediately and visibly impacts the people around you. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about with EQ here. And back to your question about whether or not this is a luxury or a necessity, it's undeniable that everybody, maybe everybody on Earth, is adapting in some way to a new now, right now. I was on the phone last night with a dear old friend of mine who's a teacher in Seattle. And while I'm aware of what teachers are going through, because my children are both in public schools and we're collectively navigating remote learning and all the changes that go with that, and I'm trying to tune into how his different teachers are responding to this differently. Some are much more comfortable with these tools than others. Some children are more comfortable with remote learning than others. Children have different needs. Families have different needs. Families have different technological capabilities. I'm thinking about how every body of human, every collective, every type of group or kind of conventional role that we all play are in this incredibly intense phase of adapting the way that we do things. People who have been going to an office for years are not going to the office anymore. Physicians and nurses and the others in the medical field who have been working in its relatively predictable volume type environment for their entire careers are all of a sudden in crisis mode. They're serving different needs in different environments at different scales, needing different tools, capabilities, and their own resilience. Families, parents, people who fill any role in society are having to adapt right now and themselves kind of heighten their ability to be resilient in these times. And if we are really increasing our awareness and our own mindfulness around what we can do to support each other through this and kind of be part of that ripple effect in the way that we respond to crisis and change, that can help us all get through this. And I don't think it's an option. We are having to adapt. There's nothing luxurious about it. It's actually core to our day-to-day being, whatever role we're in right now.
Yeah, so we've touched on themes around compassion, which is a part of emotional intelligence, and also this piece around the ability to adapt and adjust. And I think so many people right now are having to adapt, and in particular to make really difficult decisions without actually having the information. We don't know what's going to happen. So we're having to make these calls with, imperfect information, trying to predict what's going on. I know each of you have your unique perspectives on what that looks like. And I'm curious to hear, what's the role of emotional intelligence in that kind of decision making that's really not exactly data driven at this moment?
Listen to your gut. I mean, this is one of the beautiful themes that I've been witnessing in people sharing their experiences, that we have so much information that is conflicting. We have so many unknowns right now. And a lot of people are having to really find quiet and find center and listen to themselves. Find that inner voice, find your intuition, find your gut. I'll share a personal experience. As a parent, there are trust bridges that I have needed to build just in the last week or so in sharing my children's time with other close family members. And there's been a part of me that has said, no, I want to keep them with me where I know exactly what's happening and I can control the situation. Some people have advised me to be more liberal. Others, they're saying, keep them with you. And there are all these unknowns outside of the door of my home. And I, over this weekend, finally just had to have a breath and extend a little compassion to myself and say, there is no perfect decision. Nobody knows what to do in this moment better than you do, and just listen to that inner voice. And this happens in business right now, and obviously in healthcare, and in so many environments, we are having to make decisions without complete information, very limited or conflicting data. And it's more important than ever to tune in and hear that voice.
Yeah, that really resonates, Cecily. What I would add to that is, and implied in what you were saying, is the importance of intention. Generally in life, as we do have complete control over our intentions, we have a lot less control over outcomes. And I think particularly if you're, obviously we want things to turn out the way that we want them to be, generally. But the more emergent and complex a situation is, the less predictability that we have. So what I do is I really try and rest in my intentions. And a phrase that my mentor uses, Philip Moffitt, he always appends, as best as I am able to, I want to be compassionate as best as I am able in that moment, because, we don't always have access to all of our resources at the same time. And so I think just an acknowledgement of that, of saying, I want to be crystal clear about my intentions. So something that all of us can do is to actually write down, what are my intentions in this time? And then in the moment, and then this is where Cecily's advice is so useful for me, is what does my intuition, like, I'm an engineer, I want to know, like, what's the smart way to do it? What does the data say? How do I analyze the past in order to extrapolate the future? So without being that tool set feels really disorienting and not knowing. So to be super firm about your intentions, and then a willingness to go with your deeper intuition and have a comfort level with that, and then to realize that we don't actually many times control the outcomes. I don't think anybody likes having their heart broken, but when our heart breaks, it has the possibility of it breaking open, as opposed to breaking and then adding another layer on top of it. So for me, I think having a little less tight grip on outcomes is super important, and being super, super clear about intentions. And then I think that's where then letting intuition be the guide within that framework. That's what's been working for me.
Yeah, that's great, Bill. And you're also bringing up that as best as I am able. So part of this is, none of us know, right? This is so unprecedented. So giving ourselves that self-compassion, that ability to let go of the idea that there is a right way to do it, and we're just all doing our best.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the word should has been coming up a lot for me. It's like, God, I've been doing this so long, I really shouldn't have as much anxiety as I do. So I think that's a real subtle thing to be as opposed to saying, yeah, as opposed to like me holding up some ruler and being like, are you doing it right, Bill? This thing that you said, what you're eating, how you're feeling, is it right or is it wrong? Instead of, what would it be like just to care for that, to care for the anxiety, to care, just be like, yeah, that is tough. And biologically, it is not a personality defect. When we're stressed, we have less access to our resources, even if we have had access to them in the past. Yeah. And to just cut ourselves a little bit of slack, because putting that self-judgment there on top of it is not going to get you into the place of calm spaciousness quicker, I find.
Yeah. Steph, there's a comment in the chat which I think warrants a little attention. Somebody raised all this discussion about listening to your intuition and wisdom is all fine and good in your personal life, and we can usually tap into these things in our non-professional environments, but how do we do that at work? And it calls us, Bill, I think this is a good opportunity for us to speak a bit to some of the core of this work that Search Inside Yourself does, and the intention behind this webinar in the first place is, how do we how do we bring these tools into our professional selves and our work environments? You know, I felt for many years like I had done all this work, I had all this practice, I'd, you know, meditated for months in the Himalayas, and I had been on the retreats and done all the readings and the writings and the coursework. But now here I was, a corporate attorney in corporate America, and I felt like I had this secret tool set that I was carrying around that, God forbid, anybody knew I had this woo-woo background and capability. And I had this moment several years ago when I was working with a particularly impressive CEO who did really have a big influence on me in my own career and my own evolution. And there was a moment where I kind of opened the gate a little bit and brought some of these tools into our professional relationship, and it was incredibly transformative. And I'll share that just as an example. I think the meta message is what we feel in our gut and the intuitive voices we have, they feel the same in our body when we're dealing with something that has to do with our family. In the same way, we feel and experience those same signals in a work environment. We can tap into ourselves and sense when something isn't quite right, or something needs attention, or we're making a misguided decision, or we should revisit a path. And this applies in any work environment. We have that same capability to tap into that same sense. And when this arose for me in that environment, I witnessed this leader mismanaging an important situation with the executive team. He missed an opportunity to make something right and didn't do it. And we all knew it, and nobody said anything. And I couldn't shake that sense for the rest of the day that this was disappointing and it was taking us down a wrong path, and there was a way to course correct it, but I was terrified of bringing it up. And at some point later in the day, found the right environment, time, context, and I said to him after several deep breaths, I want to tell you what I just saw, and I think it was a mistake, and I recommend that we handle it in this different way. And he turned around and he put both of his hands on my shoulders and very squarely and passionately thanked me for communicating so directly and honestly, because he has people around him who he's empowered with authority and influence, because he wants that guidance. We work together because together we actually are better. We bring different skill sets and capabilities to a work environment. And sometimes it is that intuitive voice or your inner wisdom that's going to help you guide a team or an organization or a challenging situation at work. And so I think it's more important than ever to bring these tools into the work environment. Listen to yourself, use those tools, speak up, swallow, take a breath, and do what you need to do. But in my experience so far, and I've had many opportunities to do that since then, I've never regretted it.
Yeah, I think this is really a call for courage and a call for anyone who has a closeted meditation practice. Yes. Or emotional intelligence, like people around you need it. So it's a great time to step forward.
And I also think there are other frames that we can use. You know, I think one of the shadows of mindfulness practice is, you know, we can be a little bit like CrossFit or whatever, or Burning Man. If somebody's into one of those things, every problem on earth can be solved by Burning Man, CrossFit, or some unholy combination of the two. You know, I think just to put a nerdy spin on things is that this is enormously practical. Another lens that you can look at everything that was just said is that taking a page from complexity theory, right? When systems are complex, they become much more difficult to predict. Therefore, a method of dealing with those situations by looking at the past, figuring out the smart thing to do, then deploying it, doesn't work. And, you know, this is an acceleration of what we've been seeing. Steph, you mentioned VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, the pace of technology change, the pace of society change. A number of these things are changing extraordinarily rapidly. So the smart play in these situations is actually to study the emergent qualities of these complex systems and be able to pivot really, really quickly. Or, you know, in the case of if you have to figure out, you're actually sensing what reality is at the moment. So in the workplace, you may need to have 3 separate initiatives that are non-complementary to look to see which one gets traction, and then you move quickly. That's all highly intuitive work. You're not going to find generally an analysis that will lead you to the point. As a case in point, Bloom Energy is a green power company. One of the engineers said, we really need ventilators. And he just pulled up a service manual and said, oh, I could actually do this. And they went and got a dozen old ventilators, and the engineer figured out how to fix them. And now the whole company is pivoting around that. Right? There's no PowerPoint that said, we're going to switch to doing ventilators at the end of Q1, right? This was intuitive. This was highly looking at emergent qualities. This is looking at what are the capabilities of oneself as an individual and an organization, and how might we pivot to that. Now, I have every belief that the positive press they're giving is going to do great things for that company down the road when this is all over in terms of goodwill and name exposure. But in the here and now, it's this it's managing the qualities of complex systems from a point of intuition and compassion and innovation. So even if the people that you're working with are just like to that meditation stuff, like, no, thank you. The intuition is just as true when you look at it from a math and nerd standpoint.
Yeah, and Bill, you were, in your time at Google, you were the superintendent of well-being and had to make that business case internally for why we need meditation, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and other well-being offerings. I'm curious how you made that argument then, and if you would shift that argument now, if you were someone kind of advocating for more of these skills internally in an organization.
Well, so I think the key to success for this is to be intensely curious and almost view yourself as an anthropologist in your organization. So the question is, if people say, I would really like my organization to, to put more emphasis or resources towards these kinds of things, my first question is, well, what's important? Right? What's important? What behavior is rewarded? What are the initiatives? And to always, with sincerity, say, I want to help this group of people get where they're going. And in that case, the skills we're talking about, self-awareness, self-regulation, connection and understanding, all trainable skills, all that can have all these different outcomes that are benefit for whatever the initiative is. So if you're dealing with somebody who is cost-focused, if you just look right now what's going on in terms of people having anxiety or difficulty, just from an ROI standpoint, if you could do programs and it keeps one person from going into medical care, the price tag for somebody on medical leave, psychological or physical, either medical leave, is extraordinarily high. And if you can just keep 1 or 2 people from going from the sort of yellow to the red, like, to me, you can't miss the ROI. It's like a barn door, right? And this, generally the resources required are pretty low. The other thing, to speak more to Cecily's point, is that this is a superpower. Like, there's the cost avoidance story, and if you're talking to somebody where cost avoidance is what they're into, speak their language, right? If they're doing a project that really needs innovation, you can speak the language of innovation. But I think it's so important to be genuinely curious. And going back to our talk about intention, my intention is to genuinely help the person where they are and where they need to go, not to impress upon them what I'm doing. And so I think that's where I think the benefit of these practices is that they're so distributed, you can make a legitimate case in all these different domains. But ask, find out, be curious.
Yeah, that's great. And as we kind of started, people are experiencing such a range of emotions and needs right now too. So getting to know what's actually needed in your organization and community. We're getting some really wonderful questions in the chat, and please also use the Q&A. So I'd love to turn to some of the questions that are coming in from other attendees. And one of them is to the effect of, is it okay, or how can we feel okay and recognize that there's so much pain and suffering in the world? Someone expressed some concern that she is feeling pretty okay, and how can she accept those feelings? She's in a leadership position and feels like she's expressing too much calmness and positivity. Is that wrong? What would you advise?
I mean, this is EQ at work, right? I mean, it's really about finding that balance. I've actually just seen this in the last couple of days in some of my own work meetings. People approach these environments with different backgrounds and perspectives and tools. And one person might join an 8-person meeting and think that telling a couple jokes or sharing a couple funny Twitter memes are a great way to break the ice. But somebody else on that same main call may have just found out some very devastating news, whether it's financial, personal, health, whatever it might be, and finds that type of a share wildly inappropriate. So in my own experience, I'm trying to not be too far on one end or the other in relatively unknown environments. So until you can tune in on who's present and where people are, I'm trying to not be too far on one end of the spectrum or the other. That requires a certain amount of self-forgiveness and awareness and kind of mastery of my emotions, because I myself might be on one end or the other at that moment too. And until a group can ground, you need to kind of stay in an open, flexible, adaptable mode. I also think it's okay to, in an effort to get there, just ask people, you know, where is everybody? Like, how's the best way to communicate and share in this space? Being positive is wonderful, but it's also important to stay balanced and grounded as well. And sometimes if you're a leader in an organization, if you see somebody being too far on one end or the other in a way that's disruptive to somebody else's well-being, it's actually upon us to, with kindness, approach that person. Start with, I know you're doing your best. We all assume best intent. Let's together be a little bit more empathetic and sensitive to the fact that not everybody is having a day-to-day like you, whether that's very positive or very negative. And be open, be communicative. I really have found that to always help a group. And even as a leader, starting with your own experience can help kind of break the ice and bring people together.
Yeah, this idea of, you know, in particular, I think the original frame of the question was like, you know, how do I show up when other people are suffering and am I responding to it? And I think it's useful, my engineer hat on, to understand the mechanism of how this works. When we feel emotional pain, it shows up in the brain similarly to physical pain. Like it actually hurts. And our general survival algorithm is, if it's pleasant, supersize it, more please. If it's unpleasant, suppress it or stop it. So when we feel other people's emotional pain, it is physically painful to us. And then there's that idea of wanting to back away from it. This is why the research shows that when our stress levels are high, we feel suspicious, isolated, mistrustful, right? We have a tendency to be on autopilot and do what we did in the past. So this is the exact opposite of the recipe that's needed. One of the things that I find astoundingly hopeful, and it has been transformative in my own life, is that neuroplasticity works with this too. When this emotional pain from being open to other people's pain, and the research, this is known as empathic distress. And I like that word a lot better than compassion fatigue. And one is, let's honor the fact that it hurts to care about other people if they're going through a tough time. The point of joy and hopefulness is that the research also shows that if you can meet empathic distress with compassion defined in this case as just even a cognitive well-wishing or a cognitive recognition of similarities, that pain turns into a complicated form of joy. Like when I read that in the research paper, I thought, oh, like this is what it means to have your heart break open. Your heart still breaks, but it's this opening, it's this positive, it's this connecting experience. So, you know, one of the ways we can do this is we can deny other people's experience. Like maybe if we're in a place of comfort and we have a few months worth of cash on hand and we're not worried about food and we can do our jobs from home, we might want to pretend that the people for whom that's not true don't exist because it hurts. So for me, something I'm really doing, and I would really exhort people, is to really honor that hurts, and then actively, as part of your practice, do cognitive well-wishing. So I leave notes for the delivery people. I just let them know. I right 2 minutes before we went on live, I ran up to my window and shouted out the Amazon delivery guy to say thank you. We can actually do these things that connect and integrate, and that there's the chance to have that empathic distress turn into connection if we're intentional about it. And one of the things that's so important to me for all these practices is, like, you don't have to be good at this out of the gate. One of the things that we can do is we can practice this, and then we can come together in groups like this to just help remind each other of this is important, this is effective, and if we stick together, that things can be much better than otherwise.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you in particular for raising that distinction between empathic distress, where we go towards that feeling of overwhelm and either sort of breakdown or shut out, versus meeting things with compassion. I've also been doing a lot of the well-wishing practice, particularly as I go on walks, maintaining physical distance, but creating social connection, at least in my own head, by just wishing people well around me. I think that also touches on a theme that I'm seeing coming up in the chat and the questions around that relationship between emotional intelligence, resilience, and equanimity. And I wonder if either of you would speak to that. What are some of these emotional intelligence skills that really build resilience and that equanimity, that ability to kind of weather the storms with some balance?
I'll share a little story about this. It may appear as maybe overly optimistic or positive, but it's one that I've been calling upon myself a bit, which is I, for years, attended the same retreat center, and we would do these 3, 4, 5-day retreats, and maybe 30, 40 people. It was in a Rudra yoga program. It's so heavy on meditation throughout the day. And as we all aged, there were more and more children in the environment and in the community, and the teachers were always very quick to encourage us to bring the children, bring the babies, bring the toddlers, and these young beings. And needless to say, they were increasingly disruptive as they grew in volume and volume. And I think those of us who were there, who saw and experienced what could be an irritant and a distraction, a source of upset, felt this kind of apology and this shame for wanting to hide and conceal these distractions from everybody else's peaceful experience of the retreat, and in this case, life. And the teachers really called upon us to stop thinking that way. Like, life is imperfect, and it is full of pain and challenge and suffering. We are all experiencing our own version of it at different times in varying degrees. But to be able to maintain your own container of calm and resilience in the face of these moments, that's when the real work happens. And how we respond is itself the ripple effect. And so just in the last recent days, I've been thinking about the luxury of the irritant of children, and how small that is in the scheme of what we're facing today. But it's a very translatable sensibility that we can actually kind of bring our own best selves to this moment and still do our best to show up. And that doesn't mean always be positive or optimistic or healing. Sometimes that means, you finally close the door and you end whatever you just had to experience, and you let yourself just cry a little bit. And maybe you have a witness who then themselves is allowed to experience what they're going through. And this could be in a work environment as much as it could be in your living room. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of crack open those doors and build those bridges. And that in and of itself is empowering us to build resilience and connection across thousands of miles, economic, socio-political divides. It's a remarkable chance to advance in that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we're getting a little short on time to the top of the hour. One of the questions I was going to ask you each was to just recommend a resource or practice for folks, but someone put it in as a question. I like this phrasing better. What do you wish you would have started practicing in your 20s? So what's one practice that you were like, oh, please get started on this now?
Phil, do you want to go first? No. It's so simple, but it really is just a gratitude practice. I mean, I wake up every day, and I've actually had to consciously stop myself over the last couple of weeks, you know, from grabbing the phone and starting with news and texts and everything else, and just stop for a couple of minutes and just be where I am and just be in the moment. Think about several things that are just going to be fine, and then start the rest. And I think at any age, at any stage of life, that's a good way to start your day.
Especially in these times, yeah. And Bill, what would you say?
You know, there's a little bit about like, what do you wish you would have? There's so much conditionality in that. I'm gonna use my prerogative to answer it as you know, what am I going to do right after this? Because I have a little bit more control over that. What is it? Noted meditation teacher Lily Tomlin said that equanimity is giving up all hope for a better past, or forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. You know, I saw there was a question of how do you operationalize compassion. And so the practice that I think is really important to me, and one that's a lift right from SIY, is just like me, right? Some asshole went through all the garbage on my street last night, pulling out the recyclables, and just out of pique, seemingly dumped all the garbage cans over. Just like me, the person who tipped over the garbage cans is afraid and sometimes angry. Just like me, that person may not have access to their resources. Just like me, that person may be worried about their physical health and well-being. Just like me, they may have people that they're worried about. So I think, you know, just that simple, just like me. And, you know, we can even do that with all the people in this room from all around the world. I mean, it doesn't matter from Oakland to Brazil to Zurich to Asia, like just like me, everybody here, and this is an amazing thing that Cecily was pointing at, is everyone here has the intention to do things that make things better for themselves and others in the day-to-day, even though there's all sorts of reasons to run around in circles. So just maybe just like us would be a better way to put it.
I love that, Bill. And I think if I had to pick one, it would be building on that in the well-wishing practice. It's something in my normal life I use a lot on commuting to work, looking around the bus or train, and just seeing that similarity and wishing people well. And it always lifts my spirits, as well as building that connection and that orientation towards compassion. Yeah.
You can do it in social distancing. You can do it from afar. Oh, don't make it creepy.
Right, physical distancing, social connection.
You don't want to be like
don't stare.
30 yards away in a park, just being like,
right.
Oh, it's okay, I'm wishing you well, as pepper spray from your eyes.
Exactly, please do that safely, everyone. Wonderful. Well, as we come to the end of our time together, I just want to share a little bit of what's coming. So we will follow up with a recording. I know a few people were asking, is this being recorded? Will it be shared? So yes, we've been recording. We'll email out the recording to everyone, as well as some resources to help you practice, for you to share with other folks in your life. And at the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, we will be organizing more online sessions in the weeks to come. So we'll share registration links and information about that. And if any of you do want to bring some of these kinds of virtual programs or offerings in, please feel free to reach out to us. We're here to support you in that. This is such a time where these skills are really necessary, and we're happy to help you build them. And as we close, I would love to invite, we're seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat, and that's really sweet. I'd also love to hear just one thing you're taking away from our hour together. Some of the insights maybe. Sounds like just like me and meeting people where they are really registered with folks. Oh, wonderful. And it is so sweet again to have all of you here for this hour together, coming from all over the world. So as we wrap up, maybe we can all just take a breath together as we reset and move on to our next thing. So taking a big inhale, a long exhale. And thank you again for being here. Hope to see you again online soon, and hopefully in person in the not too distant future as well. And thank you so much, Bill and Cecily, for being here with us and sharing your wisdom and thoughts.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.